So good morning all. Welcome to session number 7 of Skill Sprint 2025. We are here to learn, grow and empower, and today's session is all about something every entrepreneur needs to understand. Startup mindset. Think big, start small and scale fast. Starting a business isn't just about having a great idea. It's about having the right mindset. A mindset that helps you take risks, adapt quickly and grow strategically. And to guide us through this, we have someone who has been working closely with businesses and startups, CA Sarathraj KT. Let me share a bit about his journey. He started his career by doing articleship at ASA and Associates LLP Bangalore, where he gained hands-on experience in audits and financial management. In 2016, he became a chartered accountant, and from there, his professional journey started. He worked in Bangalore and later moved to Qatar, gaining experience in top companies like Wellcare Group. He played key roles in auditing and financial consulting for business across various industries. Along the way, he also worked as a freelance consultant, handling audits and business strategies for reputed firms. Since 2019, he has been a partner at Shanavas, Bava and Co Chartered Accountants, where he helps business, especially startups, with tax, compliance, and financial strategies to grow and scale efficiently. Beyond his professional life, he's a family man. He's happily married to Renila, and they have a lovely daughter, Nihara. With his vast experience and practical insights, today's session will be a valuable one for all of us. So let's welcome CA Sarathraj KT. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, JCI Triprayar, and thank you, Siddesh, for giving me such a wonderful introduction. And I would like to thank the entire JCI Triprayar team, especially the committee members, like the board members, for giving me this opportunity to speak today. And I would like to thank JCI President Krishna for giving me this opportunity to speak today. I have been following Skill Sprint since it launched, and I am really impressed with the quality of the presentation that are being done here. And once again, thank you to the entire team. Without further ado, let's move on to the presentation. So today's topic is the startup mindset. Think big, start small, and scale fast. So my goal is to give you an overview of how the startup ecosystem works in India. So here is what we will be discussing today. We will quickly compare a startup with a traditional business, and we will explore the components of the startup mindset. And we will see which are the participants in the startup ecosystem and their roles. And we will go through the registration process and registration criteria for a startup to be recognized in India, and the different funding stages and different stages of the startup life cycle. And finally, we will quickly discuss the different startup schemes and benefits that are available to recognize startups. What defines a startup? Are all new businesses will be considered as a startup? The answer is no. So what differentiates a startup compared to a traditional business model? There is no hardcore definition as such for a startup, for the term startup, but there are few traits or characteristics that every startup possesses, which are listed in the screen. Firstly, the innovation-driven approach. Startup often has a innovation-driven approach in their operation. Like they always comes up with an innovative solution to an existing problem, or they even improve an existing solution significantly. So we can take the example of Paytm. In 2016, if you remember, the government had introduced the startup. The government had introduced the demonetization scheme in which the high value currencies were demonetized. So the local markets, which were heavily relied on cash markets, faced a severe cash crunch situation. So the company Paytm came up with an innovative solution, which was their e-wallet, electronic wallet, which significantly helped to somehow manage the cash crunch situation in the market. So they quickly onboarded all the shopkeepers to their portal, and they gave cash credits or cashbacks or other incentive schemes for the consumers in order to encourage using their app. So startup often comes up with such innovative solutions. So one of the basic trait for a startup to be recognized as a startup is to have a innovative driven approach. So the second criteria for a startup to be considered as a startup is high growth potential. So by high growth potential, we mean that their ability to expand significantly in terms of revenue or in terms of market reach. Startup always have a huge market. Startup always aim for a huge market. We can take the example of Byju's here. So Byju's is an edutech platform. We all know they have an e-learning platform. So Byju's have a huge market in front of them. Like the entire student community of India or even the world could be their potential customers. So even getting a small percentage of that market share would make Byju's a profitable company. Or even they can expand to different streams, like they can expand, they are mainly now focusing on school students, but they can expand their operation to other streams like professional exams, competitive exams, and other post-graduation and graduation level of education. So the market in front of them is very huge. Even getting a small percentage of that market share would make the Byju's a profitable company. But right now they have all messed it up. We all know that's a different story. So startup always often comes up with an idea that has a huge potential market. So next characteristic of a startup is having a scalable business model. Scalability refers to the ability of a startup to meet the increased demand by not spending much on their capital expenditure or not making a proportionate expenditure. Here we can take the example of Ola. As we all know, Ola or Uber, both are same. Ola is a copy of the US company Uber. So Ola does not even a single car. What they have is an online platform which connects the drivers to the riders. So if Ola wants to expand it to another region or expand it to another city, all they need to do is to onboard the drivers of that new city. So scaling becomes really easy for them because they already have a platform. They have already built so much amount. I mean, they already have spent so much amount to build a platform. So by using that platform, they can scale to different markets easily. So scalability refers to the ability to expand to other markets without spending much expenditure. So Ola has this inherent scalable business model. So startup often should have a scalable business model like Ola. And the final characteristic or trait is technology integration. Startup often integrates technology into their operation. If you take any startup, any kind of startup, they uses technology either in their solution or process. We can see a lot of AI companies are coming up. With all of them uses AI technology to provide different kinds of solution, different kinds of products. Some of them use like AI based text to video models, AI based image generation models. Like that, there are so many businesses that operates on technology. So technology integration is a key trait for a startup. There is a fintech giant in the world called Stripe. Stripes makes the global payments seamless, global credit card payments seamless. They uses LLM and advanced API models to streamline their payments and secure their payments, detect frauds in their payment system. So technology integration is a crucial aspect of a startup. So if a business satisfy all these conditions, or a business has all these characteristics, they can often termed as a startup. So now we will quickly compare the startup with a traditional business model. So a traditional business model always, in terms of business model, the traditional business always work in a proven market. For example, if you start a grocery, we know what could be the revenue that we are going to get from that business, what could be the level of profit that we are going to make. Whereas a startup always comes up with an innovative solution which often does not have an existing market. So they often create a market for their products. So the basic difference in the business model is traditional market always works in a proven market, whereas a startup operates in a relatively new market which has no proven track record. And in terms of growth approach, a traditional business always focuses on linear growth, whereas a startup focuses on, where startup can grow exponentially because they have a huge market in front of them. They have a huge market potential, and they have their business is inherently scalable. So due to these two traits, they'll be able to grow exponentially compared to a traditional business. And in terms of risk and innovation, a traditional business is always risk averse, and they always focus on steady improvements, whereas a startup has huge risk involved in it. If you take the statistics, only 1 out of 10 startups succeed. All other gets closed, or all other fails. So the risk involved in startup is really huge, but the return is also very high in the startup sector. And finally, in terms of the funding pattern, traditional business are always self-funded or depending on bank loans, whereas startup always takes funding from external investors like venture capitalist firms or angel investors. Angel investors refers to a high net worth individual who loves to invest in early stage startups. So startup often needs external funding to fuel their growth. So these are the basic difference between a traditional business model and a startup business. So I hope you have got an idea what a startup is and what are the main characteristics of a startup. So let's quickly move to our other topic. I mean, what is a startup mindset? Why the startup mindset matters, and why is it important even for a non-startup business? So if you take a closer look at any successful startup, they'll be following these three I mean pattern, like thinking big, starting small, and scaling fast. Here, thinking big means often aiming for a huge market, or dreaming for a huge market, or providing solutions that are useful for a huge huge crowd, or huge user base, creating a huge user base. The first thing is thinking big refers to aiming for a huge market. And the second thing, starting small. Startup always start their product as a prototype. They first create a prototype of their product, and they refine it to the extent possible. They give it to the initial customers for feedback, and they go through the feedback loop and create a final product market fit. Once they achieve a final product market fit, then they aim for scaling up. They'll take external funding from angel investors or venture capital firms, or they'll go to the next level by scaling it up to the different markets or different regions. So this is the basic structure or pattern that every startup is following. So let's break it down further to the startup mindset components. The startup mindset involves firstly what we already discussed: innovation and problem solving mentality. The startup always aim for providing innovative solutions. The next characteristic of a startup mindset is agility and adaptability. So startup pivot quickly based on the market feedback. This adaptability is very crucial in the rapidly changing business environment. We can again take the example of Paytm. So Paytm, if you remember, when they started, it was a mobile recharge platform like free charge. Then when the demonetization hit, they quickly pivoted to e-wallets. So they seized that market opportunity. They act promptly on change in the market, and they capitalized on that. So what made Paytm who they are today is their ability to take quick decision based on the market feedback. So taking quick decision and adaptability is a crucial mindset every startup should have. And startups are often customer centric. They over obsess on the needs of the customer, and they always try to create products that the customer really wants. And next thing is resource efficiency. So startup often works in constrained resources, like they will not be having much of a funds, and they will be having constraint for good human resource as well. So which forces them to be creative. So we can take the example like there are many automotive companies in India like Bajaj, TVS, and Hero and all. But the two startup, which are Ola Electric and Ather Energy, are the two companies which created a EV revolution in India. So even though the big companies have huge R&D and experience and track record, it was the startups who created a EV revolution in India by providing affordable, or by revolutionizing the two-wheeler EV market in India. So being innovative and being creative, or coming up with good products is not directly linked to having great budget or great resources in their bag. So resource efficiency is something that every business should learn from startup. Yeah, the next component in the startup mindset is the growth mindset. Startup embrace failure as a loss, failure as a limit. They are not afraid to fail. It's a common thing to fail in startup, as we already discussed. Only 1 out of 10 or even lesser, even the ratio is even lesser than that. Only 1 out of 10 startups get succeeded. So failure is a common thing to happen in the startup industry. What we need to focus is we should be learning from our mistakes. So startup often carries a mindset to learn from their mistake. Also, startup is also purpose driven. They form a team and they work towards achieving something meaningful, or they try to provide solutions to real existing problem. So this engagement, I mean, this mission and togetherness driving engagement and commitment in their operation. So these are the main components of a startup mindset. Even if you are not a startup business owner, incorporating these or adapting these qualities in their business is going to make wonders in your business. I hope you have got an idea of the startup mindset. So let's quickly move on to the startup ecosystem. So startup does not grow in isolation. They thrive in an ecosystem. So here ecosystem refers to a network of startup entrepreneurs and founders and the support organization and service organization, which creates an atmosphere for which helps the startup to grow. Think of it like a garden. Like we can treat the startup ecosystem like a garden, and startups are plants in it. The startup ecosystem provides the required sunlight and soil, water, everything to the startup, and creates an atmosphere for it to grow. So these are the main participants in a startup ecosystem. Firstly, the entrepreneurs and the startup teams. The entrepreneurs and the founders are the heart of every startup ecosystem. They come up with visionary ideas and they form a team and works towards achieving a mission. The startup entrepreneurs are the main component in every startup ecosystem. And nextly, the investors. The investors are required in every startup ecosystem to fuel the growth of any startup. In one or other stage, the startup needs to go for an external funding. So investors are those who fuels the startup and help them to scale to the next level. Investors could be either angel investors or venture capital companies or private equity firms. So these investors not only help the startup with the money, but they also provide a mentorship or guidance to the startup, because the investors are often invest in multiple startups, and they know how the startup things works, and they will be able to guide the founders in the right path. So investors is a main component in a startup ecosystem. Next, the support organization. Here, by support organization, we mean that the startup accelerators and startup incubators startup accelerators and startup incubators are those organizations government has, which are backed by government and which works in every state. So the purpose of these support organization is to provide mentorship and guiding to the early stage startup by giving them co-working space and also conducting networking events, and also giving them or facilitating the government schemes or grants, etc. So support organization is a main component in a startup ecosystem. Next, educational institutions. So universities, colleges, and research centers are vital for fostering talent and innovation. They produce skilled graduates, conduct cutting-edge researches, and often partner with startups to produce skilled graduates. So they often partner with startups to develop new technologies or solutions. Educational institutions also host entrepreneurship programs, hackathons, and innovation labs, feeding the ecosystem with fresh ideas and expertise. So educational institutions are a key component in a startup ecosystem. And nextly, the service providers. Service providers refers to the consultants like lawyers, tax consultant, and chartered accountants who give necessary inputs to the startup in a complex scenario, like for evaluating a tax plan, evaluating their tax strategies, evaluating their financial statement, and also providing technical consultancy to them. So they can outsource these services to the service providers, and they can focus on their core objective of making their business a success. So service providers are also a main component in a startup ecosystem. The next component in a startup ecosystem is government policies and government and regulatory bodies. So government and regulatory bodies startup ecosystem through their policies and incentives. So in India, there is something called Startup India recognition. So through that scheme, the government is giving a lot of incentives to the eligible startup. So government is responsible for creating a good atmosphere by creating good policies that are friendly, startup friendly, and government is responsible for making an ecosystem startup friendly. And market participants. Market participant refers to the consumers of the startup or its competitors. The consumers help the startup to refine their products or solution by giving proper feedback. So going through the feedback loop, the startup keeps the product better, and the competitors also forces the startups to improve their solution or improve their product. And the next component of a startup ecosystem is infrastructure. So physical and digital infrastructure like high-speed internet, having affordable co-working space, or having affordable real estate, having good roads and transportation method, all amounts to, all are crucial in a good startup ecosystem. It's the backbone of the startup ecosystem. So access to reliable technology, affordable real estate, and connectivity enables the startups to operate efficiently and collaborate globally. So strong infrastructure reduces operational challenges and support rapid growth to a startup. And there are few cultural elements like we already discussed about the startup mindset, ability to take risk, innovative in their approach, and quickly adapt to the market conditions, taking failure as a learning. All those things are considered as cultural elements. So all these things combined creates a synergy which often helps the startups to grow. So having a good startup ecosystem is crucial for every startup to thrive and succeed. How to get recognized as a startup? So in India, the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade (DPIIT) is responsible for giving startup recognition. So there are few criteria to be met for a startup to be recognized as a startup. Firstly, the company age. The company should not be of age more than 10 years from the date of incorporation. And secondly, the nature of, the legal status of the business. It should be either a private limited company registered under the Companies Act 2013, or it should be a limited liability partnership firm, or it should be a registered partnership firm to get recognized as a startup company. That means an individual and any other kind of business entity or legal entity will not be allowed to take the startup in their recognition. So the companies mostly take the form of a private limited company because of its flexibility to issue shares and transfer shares. So the next criteria is company should not be having a turnover of more than 100 crore in any of the financial year since its incorporation. And the next criteria is the company should be an original entity, which means the company should not be something that formed by demerger of an existing company. The bigger companies often go for demerger based on their streams of revenue. So a demerged company or a company that formed by splitting up an existing company is not eligible for getting registered as a startup. And finally, the innovative and scalable. A startup should be innovative and scalable in its business model. So innovation and scalability we already discussed. So in order for a startup to get recognized as a startup under the DPIIT startup recognition scheme, they should have a innovative solution to an existing problem, and their business model should be inherently scalable. So if a startup possesses all these characteristics, or a startup meet all these criteria, then they are eligible to get registered as a startup under the DPIIT startup scheme. The registration process is online in the Startup India website, and they'll be asking for a few details of the company, like the team, the composition of the team, and they'll ask us to upload a video of the solution that the startup is giving. And after giving the required details, the startup, if they evaluate our application and if our startup satisfies all these conditions, they'll issue us the Startup India recognition certificate. Nowadays, all the applications are getting approved because the government of India wants to promote India as a startup hub. and as a startup friendly nation. So all the applications are getting approved these. So once your company is recognized under the Startup India scheme, there are few benefits available to the startup. Firstly, self-certification under two laws, which are the labor laws and environmental laws. They are allowed to self-certify under these two laws, which often reduces their compliance, time and effort for their compliance activities, and they can focus on their core business activity. And secondly, the startup patent application and IPR applications are considered in a fast track mode, like they are processed in priority compared to other applications, and also they enjoy 80% discount in fee for the IPR and patent application cost. And another benefit available to the recognized startup is exemption under Section 80 IAC of the Income Tax Act. Under Section 80 IAC, a startup can avail 3 years of tax exemption, 3 consecutive years of tax exemption within a period of 10 years from the date of its incorporation. And there is an exemption under Section 56 too. 56 talks about a concept called angel tax. Under Section 66, if a startup is or if any company is issuing shares at a premium, shares at a price higher than their market value, the difference between the fair market value and the price of the share, actual price of the share at which they are issued, is liable to be taxed under Section 56. Startups often issue shares at a higher price because of their higher valuation. So under this section, under Section 56, there is the difference between the price difference, the shares at which the price at which the shares are actually issued and the actual fair market value of the shares are supposed to be taxed. For startups, this provision has been exempted. For startups need not pay tax under the Section 56. And the startup recognition helps the startups to easily wind up their company under the insolvency and bankruptcy code, which will reduce the time and cost involved in winding up of a company, and the founder can immediately shift their focus to another venture without spending much time and effort on a failed startup. So the next benefit available to the startup is easier public procurement norms. Under the Startup India registration scheme, the startups are given some relaxation in applying for the government tenders. So the chance of getting the tenders allotted to the startups are really high. So thereby it will create a revenue source for the startups. So these are some of the benefits available under the Startup India scheme. There are many benefits available which are sector specific, like which are specified to a specific sector, like healthcare sector or defense sector or manufacturing sector. So these are the common benefits available under the Startup India scheme. So this is the statistics of the Startup India registration across India. Till date, there are around 165 startups recognized in India, and 3,604 startups have claimed income tax exemptions, and there are 4,065 SIDBI funds of funds. Funds of fund refers to a government fund that not directly invest in a startup, but invest in a venture capital company. The venture capital fund will in turn invest the funds into the startups. So coming to the startup life cycle, these are the different stages involved in the life of a startup. Firstly, the ideation stage. In the ideation stage, the startup identifies the problem. The ideation stage, the startup identifies a potential problem and finds a solution to it. So they first make a MVP. MVP refers to the minimum viable product, which is a prototype of their final product. And they do all the testing on all the experimentation on that minimum viable product. And in the validation stage, they give their minimum viable product for the initial set of customers. They take the feedback from the customers. They refine their product or solution based on the feedback from their customers, and they finally achieve a product market fit. Once the product market fit is ready, they will focus on acquiring customers which is the early traction stage. In the early traction stage, the startup focuses on acquiring customers and getting some amount of revenue. And once they prove in the smaller market, they will aim for scaling up by taking external fund. So in the scaling stage, they will focus on market expansion and team growth and process optimization. And finally, the startup will reach to a stage called maturity stage, where they will be enjoying a definite share of the market, and also they would have achieved the stage of a stable growth, and they'll be having profitability. In the maturity stage, the startup often provides exit option to the investors. The investors would have joined in the startup in many stages like validation or early traction stage, like angel investors or venture capitalist firms. When the startup achieves maturity stage, they often gives an exit option to the already onboarded investors. When talking about the startup funding stages, these are the main funding stages in the startup. There is pre-seed funding. The first stage of the funding is called pre-seed or bootstrapping. In the bootstrapping stage, the startup primarily focus, the bootstrapping stage, the source of fund is primarily the personal saving of the founders, or they will take funds from their close relatives and family. So in bootstrapping stage, only the funds of family and own funds are involved. And once in the bootstrapping stage, the startup founder tries to build an MVP or tries to make a minimum viable product. And once it is ready, then it may plan for the seed funding stage. In the seed funding stage, an angel investor comes into the angel investor gets onboarded to the company. As I said earlier, angel investor means angel investor is often a high net worth individual who regularly invest in early stage startups. So angel investors can help the company in two ways. Angel investors will have experience of investing in startup. They will have track record of investing in many startups, and they can properly guide the startups for the next funding round. Next funding round is where the angel investor gets an exit from the company in a profitable way. Angel investors are helpful for the startup in the early stages, not just by providing money and by providing their insight for the growth of the company. Angel investors gets onboarded to the company in the seeding stage. The next round of investment is called the Series A. In the Series A stage of funding, startup takes investment from the venture capital company. Venture capital fund refers to funds that invest in multiple startups. The venture capital company properly evaluates the startup. They provide the growth metrics for the startup. They create evaluation methods, and they create a proper timeline for using the funds applied by them. And in the next stage, when the startup plans for expansion, they will go for Series B or Series C funding. The Series B or Series C funding will be often from venture capital firms or bigger venture capital firms, or it will be from private equity firms. So the fund involved in this stage will be higher compared to the previous stage. The difference between a private equity investor and a venture capital investor is that venture capitalist focuses on early stage startups, whereas private equity focuses on a already established startup. So Series B can extend to Series C, Series D, and all. And in the final stage, the startup will plan for an IPO or initial public offer, in which they get recognized in a recognized stock exchange in India. So Paytm and Zomato are two startups that recently got listed in the Indian stock exchange. Not that recently, it's been 2 or 3 years ago. So this is the different funding stages involved in a startup. So if you want to get your startup funded, what are the steps to be followed? So the first step is assessing the need for funding. In the first step, we should assess what is the amount required for our company, what is the roadmap. Roadmap refers to the number of months that we can survey by taking this fund from the external investors, and the kind of instrument that we are going to issue to the investor, and the percentage of dilution that we are going to offer to the investor. Here, dilution means the share of the company, the percentage of the company that we are ready to sell to the company. If an angel investor is ready to invest 1 crore in our company, and in return, we are giving 10% of our share to 10% share of our company to the investor, then we can say the company is diluted by 10%. So in the first stage, we need to assess the amount of fund that we require and the funding instrument and all. And once we are ready with the, once we decide the amount of fund required, then the next step is investment readiness check. We need to prepare the proper business plan for our business, and we should conduct a legal due diligence from our side itself, where we'll be checking the compliances and other things, whether the company has whether the company has met all the compliance requirement under the different laws in India. So once we are satisfied that the company is ready for investment, then the next step is preparing a pitch deck report. The pitch deck is a presentation to showcase your startup to potential investors. It is used to attract the investors to your company. So the pitch deck there are some key slides a pitch deck should have. Mainly, it should contain the problem, what the problem that the startup is solving, and the solution, how does your product or service solve the problem. And nextly, the market, what is the market the startup is aiming for. And next, the business model, how the business model make the money. And team, who are the founders of the startup, what are their track record, what is their educational qualification, all these things matters. And traction, what is the progress that the company have made so far. So basically a pitch deck report should contain all the particulars that we discussed just now. So once we are ready with the pitch deck, then we should start targeting the investors. So investors could be sector specific. There are investors who invest only in specific sectors. So based on our industry and the stage in which we are in, we should start targeting the investor. And once the investor is ready to invest in our company, or investor funds that our company is investable, then they will conduct a due diligence process, which is often done by a third party. The investor assigns a third party to conduct a due diligence on our company, where all the documents of the company will be thoroughly verified, especially the potential threat that the company can have in the future based on the non-compliances that the company has already done. So in the due diligence process, a thorough checking of the company is done. And after the due diligence, if the investor finds it investable, and the investor feels that they are ready to invest in the company, then the next step is to draft a term sheet. In the term sheet, the basic terms of the investment will be mentioned, like the amount of investment, the dilution, the different rights available to the investor and the startup founders. So while drafting a term sheet, we should take proper care that it should not be one-sided. It should be fairly balancing between the likes of startup as well as the investor. So once the term sheet is ready, then the next step would be to draft a proper shareholding agreement, in which all the conditions and details will be mentioned in detail. And after drafting the shareholding agreement, then there are few compliance requirements, like issuing shares, filing few returns in the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, etc. So this is the funding steps involved in a startup. So what do an investor look for in a startup? From the investor's perspective, they will be mainly focusing on these aspects in a startup. Firstly, the objective and the problem that the startup is solving, and the management team. They often give more weights to the management team than other metrics, because in the initial stage, the track record of the founder and the ability of the founder that the startup weighs more. And next thing, the market landscape. They assess what is the market that is available to the startup. They will check the scalability of the business model. They will evaluate the customers and suppliers, existing suppliers and customers of the business. They will do a competitive analysis and financial assessment. Some financial projections will be made, and the burning rate of the present burning rate of the startup will be assessed. Here, by burning rate, it means what is the amount of cost that a startup has to incur to survive monthly. So these are the main parameters that an investor will be checking in a startup. And finally, the exit avenues. The investor needs to have an option to exit profitably from the startup. So Investor will be always concerned about the exit options available to us, exit options available from a startup. So these are the main things that a investor looks for in a startup in the point of view of investing in a startup. So these are the commonly used startup funding instrument. There are equity instrument, debt instruments, and hybrid instrument. Equity instruments are equity shares, preference shares, and CCPS. And debt instruments are debentures, term loans, and working capital loans. And hybrid instruments are convertible notes, convertible debentures, and CCDs. So in the early stage, the startup will not be able to afford debt instrument because it often comes with the obligation of interest or other costs. So in the early stage, startup will be always focusing on equity or hybrid models of instruments. So hybrid models of instrument will eventually get converted to equity instrument. So based on the nature of the startup and based on the stage of the startup, they have to choose what is the funding instrument that will do good for them. So these are some funding or funding schemes or grant introduced by the government of India. There is something called Startup India Seed Fund Scheme, which gives 50 lakh per startup for startup which are in the proof of concept or prototype development, which are involved in proof of concept and prototype development stage. So they give 50 lakhs per startup, and the eligibility criteria is 2 years, which are early stage startups. So the application process is done through the Startup India portal. And there are funds for startup, which is called FFFs. The government-backed fund that invest in venture capital funds. These funds do not directly invest in the startup company. They invest directly into a venture capital company, and the venture capital company in turn invest in a startup. There is, for the funds scheme, there is a total corpus of 10 crore, and it has been divided into different sectors. Eligible venture capital funds are, venture capital funds are eligible for these funds, and it is managed by the Small Industry Development Bank of India. And there are credit guarantee scheme for startups, which offers loans up to 5 crores. And the eligibility criteria, it should be recognized startup, and it is done through bank or financial institution. There is Adal Innovation Mission, which issues grants to incubators, and incubators in turn give it to eligible startups, and it is part of Niti Aayog initiatives. And there are Digital India e-governance initiatives, which focuses mainly on tech-based startups, and it gives grants to tech-based projects. And there is Mudra Yojana, which is common. Loans up to 10 lakh is available for eligible businesses. Not even non-startups can apply for this Mudra scheme. And there is Biotechnology Ignition Grant, BIG, which funds up to 10 lakh per project for eligible projects of biotech startups and researchers. So this is managed by the Biotech Industry Research Assistance Councils. Then we have Make in India initiative, encourages manufacturing. The Make in India initiative is for encouraging manufacturing and defense sector. Manufacturing startups and defense sector startups are eligible for these funds, and this is a sector specific fund. And we already discussed there are many startup incubators in India. The main startup incubators in India is T-Hub in Telangana, IIM Calcutta, IIM Bangalore, Atal Incubation Centers, and Startup Warehouse Delhi. And the main incubators in Kerala is the Kerala Startup Mission, PUSAT, Technopark, and IITM, and Kitco Innovation and Incubation Centers. So the startup incubators are crucial for guiding an early stage startup. They provide co-working space, and they provide mentorship and guidance to the early stage startups. So role of startup incubators is crucial in every startup ecosystem. So finally, there are some funding schemes or grants that are given by Kerala Startup Mission. Firstly, there is an innovation grant. The grants are in the nature which are not repayable. So there is something called an idea grant which is given in the ideation stage or proof of concept stage to the startups. The amount of grant is 3 lakh, and there is idea grant for students, which is the grant amount is up to 2 lakhs, and productization grant, which is up to 7 lakh, and women or transgender production grant, which is up to 12 lakhs, and market acceleration grant, which is up to 10 lakh and scale up grant, which is up to 15 lakh. So all the eligible startups can apply for these schemes through the Startup India, Kerala Startup Mission Scheme website. So the benefit of these schemes are these are not repayable, subject to certain conditions. So another scheme that the Kerala Startup Mission has is seed fund. So under the seed fund, up to 15 lakh amount of subsidized loan is available to startups at a rate of 6% per annum, with a moratorium period of 2 lakhs to 12 months, and which is repayable in 24 EMIs. And if the loan amount is more than 5 lakh, it will be repayable in 36 EMIs. So this is available to early stage startups. The amount of fund involved is up to 15 lakhs. And finally, there is a scheme by the Kerala Financial Corporation, which is designed to help the startup. There are different types of loan based on the stage of the startup. For a productization stage startup, they'll offer 25 lakh loan, collateral free loan. And for commercialization stage, they'll be issuing 50 lakhs loan, and scaling up stage 100 lakhs loan. So these are the major funding schemes funding schemes available under the startups. Anyone has any doubts or questions?
Yes, thank you, Sharath. Anyone has a question or has any feedback, you can unmute yourself and ask your question or give your feedback. Sharath, I have a question.
Yeah.
You talked about startup ecosystem.
Yes.
How can new startups develop these networks and connections? What are your experiences on this? How people can network and talk to people?
One thing is the Kerala Startup Mission gives a co-working space where we can start our office, and there will be many networking events that will be happening. One of the networking event is that startup Huddle Global, which the Kerala Startup Mission conducts every year. So Startup India, or the Kerala Startup Mission often comes up with networking events like Huddle Global, or in the inside the Kerala Startup Mission compound. There are many events that are happening, and they will help the potential startups to connect to the investors or angel investor. And in Kerala, there are other networking events as well, something called Thai Kerala. All these events are helpful for the startups to get connected to the investors and other participants in the ecosystem.
Thank you so much. Can I invite Rishi to just speak a few words? Rishi is a regular attendee of Skill Sprint, so I just want him to give a feedback on the session. Rishi.
ഒരു ഡൗട്ട് ഉണ്ട്.
Yes.
ഇപ്പോൾ സാർ പറഞ്ഞായിരുന്നു സ്റ്റാർട്ടപ്പ് ഇന്ത്യ രജിസ്ട്രേഷനിൽ പ്രൈവറ്റ് ലിമിറ്റഡ് കമ്പനിയും രജിസ്റ്റേർഡ് ഫോമും അതേപോലെ തന്നെ LLPക്കും രജിസ്റ്റർ ചെയ്യാറുണ്ട്. അപ്പൊ ഈ രജിസ്റ്റേർഡ് ഫോം എന്ന് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത് എന്താണ്? ഇപ്പൊ നോർമൽ പാർട്ണർഷിപ്പ് ഫേമിന് നമുക്ക് സ്റ്റാർട്ടപ്പ് രജിസ്ട്രേഷൻ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുമോ?
Normal partnership firm with the group registration, we can go for Startup India registration.
എക്സലന്റ് സെക്ഷൻ ആയിരുന്നു. നോർമലി പല ക്ലയൻസ് നമ്മുടെ അടുത്ത് വന്ന് സ്റ്റാർട്ടപ്പ് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുമ്പോൾ നമുക്കൊരു സ്റ്റാർട്ടപ്പ് എന്ന് കേൾക്കുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ നോർമലി വിചാരിക്കാറുള്ളത് റീസെന്റ് ആയിട്ട് സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്ത സ്ഥാപനമോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എല്ലാ കാറ്റഗറിക്കാർക്കും സ്റ്റാർട്ടപ്പിലേക്ക് മൂവ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നതായിരുന്നു ആദ്യം കരുതിയിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നത്. പക്ഷെ ഈ സെക്ഷൻ കേട്ടപ്പോൾ ക്ലിയർ ആയി സ്റ്റാർട്ടപ്പ് എന്ന് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത് എന്താണെന്നതും അതേപോലെ തന്നെ സ്റ്റാർട്ടപ്പിലൂടെ ഫണ്ടിങ് കിട്ടുന്നത് എങ്ങനെയുള്ള മേഖലയിലേക്കുള്ളതാണെന്നുള്ളതും ഈ സെക്ഷനിൽ ക്ലിയർ ആയിരുന്നു. താങ്ക് യു സർ.
Thank you Rishi for your feedback.
Thank you Rishi. I have shared a feedback link in the chat. You can provide your feedback in the Google Sheet that I've just posted in the chat. Also, the contact details of CA Sarathraj is shared on the screen. Anyone who is interested, you can just note it down, and if you have any specific doubts, you can clarify. Can I invite Nidish? Nidish, you are here. Can you just give a feedback on the session? Nidish.
Firstly, I give the thanks to JCI for giving me the opportunity and providing this great. And thank you, Sarath sir. It's an enlightening session on Startup India, and the discussion has provided the great insights to various government initiatives and funding opportunities and support systems are available for entrepreneurs. And the explanations has benefits on Startup India scheme like tax exemptions and funding supports was very informative. And this session was well structured in the slides. So very wonderful slides. And the real world examples are shared, made it even more engaging. So I appreciate the clarity and depth on the information has provided here. And looking forward to more such sessions are helping aspiring entrepreneurs to navigate the startup ecosystems as friendly. And also, I have some clarity as required. I already provide the funds are required for startup in debt and equity and hybrid. So
Okay.
I have seen that so many financial institutions have in Kerala has not supported to the startup in some financial issues. So many financial institutions are not providing a good support to the entrepreneurs for walking to the front for starting in startup. So what are the issues are mainly faced or what are the issues are mainly provided from the financial institutions to the entrepreneurs? Some for funds as not supported from the government or so not supported in directly, but in that platform, like so many government funds and schemes are provided, like Pradhan Mantri Startup India scheme and Mudra Yojana is also. But so many financial institutions are not provided like this. So what are the reasons, sir?
One of the main reason could be the high risk involved in startup. Financial institution always tries to play safely. Like they should be getting, they always want to get their interest or other cost service. So startup cannot guarantee a regular repayment of a debt instrument or a instrument that bears an interest. So that could be one of the main reason the banks are hesitant to invest in the startups. So also the startup will not have any track record. They will not be able to show any real record that shows they have this much of profit or they have this much of revenue. And in the early stage, startup will not have much of a revenue, or even the most of the startup will be running in loss in the initial stages. So with that kind of financial statement, it will not be prudent for the bank side to take such a risk. Also, as I mentioned, there is huge risk involved in startup. Only 1 out of 10 startup gets succeeded. So I feel that could be the reason why the financial institutions are hesitant to invest in the startup. So by the government policies or other government initiative that should be rectified, then that can be improved, I feel.
Thank you, Nidish. So what a powerful session. CA Sarathraj KTA gave us deep insights into the startup mindset. Think big, start small, scale fast, showing how calculated risks, adaptability, and strategic growth drives success. His experience and practical wisdom has truly inspired us. A big thank you to him for sharing his expertise. Thank you so much, sir, for the honest and dedicated effort to empower us all. I now invite JCI Triprayar President Krishna to propose the vote of thanks.
On behalf of JCI Triprayar, I am truly grateful to CA Sarathraj KT for taking the time to share his valuable insights with us today. Your guidance has made the session both informative and inspiring. A heartfelt thank you to our organizing team and every participant who contributed to making this session a success. A special appreciation goes to our leadership team, Secretary JC Abhishek, Treasurer JC Ankit PS, Vice President Training JC Sitesh, Director Training JC Savit, for their dedication in making Skills Sprint 2025 a reality. Your efforts are deeply valued. Let's continue to learn, grow, and create meaningful experiences together. Looking forward to seeing you all in our future sessions. Thank you. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you. So the learning never
Thank you.
stops. See you next week for the next sprint. Thank you. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.